To the audience.
Yes.
Answer the questions to the audience.
All right. Okay. Welcome to the 2018 Issaquah Candidate Forum presented by the Kiwanis Club of Issaquah, Issaquah branch of AEUW, and the Issaquah Cable TV Commission. I am Judy Rogers, and with me is Debbie Burdo, your moderators for tonight. In the next hour, we will hear from the 4 candidates for the Washington State Legislature District 41. They are Tim Cruikshank, Tana Sen for position 1, and Mi Lin Tai and Michael Appleby for position 2. The forum will begin with 2-minute opening statements from each candidate. Questions will then follow with a 1-minute response and then a 30-second rebuttal from the first responder. Our timer is seated in the front row and will raise a warning when 15 seconds remain and a stop signal when time is up. Please be careful with your time. We may have to stop you. Questions have been gathered from the community. If an answer needs further clarification, we may ask a follow-up question. Audience, you have been supplied with note cards to submit questions, and we will try to get to as many of those as we can. Questions may not be directed to only one candidate. Please raise your hand and your note card will be collected. Audience, we also ask that you hold your applause until the end of the forum. The last question will come from the candidates themselves. Each will ask their challenger a question. Each candidate will then have 1 minute for their closing remarks. So let's get started. We'd like to keep the forum as friendly as Issaquah is known to be. So therefore, we're just going to call you by your first name. That way you don't have to worry about how to pronounce your last name. So we will begin with our 2-minute opening statements. We'll start with Tim, followed by Tana, and then by Mi Lin, and then Michael.
Thank you so much. My name is Tim Cruikshank, and I'm running for the State Legislature, 41st District, Position 1. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself to give you a little bit of background on why I'm running and why I'm uniquely qualified. I grew up in Federal Way, the son of a longshoreman and a U.S. Marine. I was taught hard work, discipline, and respect for others. And I know the meaning of $1 and what it's like to work for minimum wage. When I was young, I would get up in the morning and I'd deliver the paper before school. I'd drive from Federal Way to West Seattle where I attended high school. I'd drive back home and I worked at a local restaurant washing dishes. Unlike my opponent, I'm not a career politician. I have real life experiences to draw from. I know the meaning of true sacrifice. Having served 25 years in the United States Navy as a U.S. Navy SEAL, Medical Service Corps officer, joined the Navy in the junior enlisted ranks, and I worked my way up through hard work, putting myself through school, earning 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree. I retired as a lieutenant commander. I moved across the nation 17 times. I attended more funerals than I care to remember. I've lived overseas and I've been deeply embedded in multiple cultures around the world. I have fought against tyranny and oppressive governments. And some of my most cherished memories are watching women in Iraq voting for the first time, children in Afghanistan who were the first in their family to ever attend school. But conversely, I've watched as the flag-draped coffins return from overseas with the remains of my friends who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom, freedom of others. I have worked with individuals at the highest levels of our government in Washington, D.C., and I served as a liaison to NATO. I know how to work across the aisle to find middle ground, make the tough decisions. I sit here today in front of you with a servant's heart and a lifetime of sacrifice. I am a fiscal conservative with a social conscience. I believe in the U.S. Constitution, the American flag, and our American heroes and our local law enforcement, first responders. I believe in less government control, lower taxes, more money in your paycheck. And unlike my opponent, I believe in government transparency. Unfortunately, she voted to shield you from all government communication with Senate Bill 6617. Let that sink in for a minute. I bring a career of hard work, discipline, proven leadership, honor, and self-sacrifice to the table. I ask for your vote and your confidence that, unlike others, I will never forget that I was voted in by all of you with your trust to be your voice in our district in Olympia. Thank you.
Anna?
Thanks so much. Good evening. I am Tana Sen, pleased to be serving as your state representative, and I am seeking a third term. I started in politics just as a mom on Mercer Island, concerned about a road safety issue. And I didn't think my city council was doing a good job, and they were more concerned about slowing down commute by 30 seconds than they were about my neighbor being hit and killed on the road and people crossing the street and not being able to get to the high school and the library. So I got involved in my community. I ended up on the Mercer Island City Council for a number of years and loved that work representing cities, which is so important for our district, which has 6 cities, 5 school districts. And I continue to bring that perspective with me to Olympia. So I loved those urban issues. I loved really digging down into my local community, but I also knew that I wanted to get more involved in education and in transportation and in gun safety. And so when there was an opportunity, I headed to the legislature where I've been serving, and I love it. I am thrilled to be able to bring my background as a working mom, bringing that perspective to issues. This past legislative session, after 75 years of making no progress on equal pay in Washington State, we passed my equal pay legislation that makes sure that women in the workplace can talk freely about their wages without fear of retaliation, and so that they know they can, if they're not getting equal pay, and then they can ask for it. And it was really some landmark legislation with other components that are leading the nation. I also brought my perspective working as a volunteer for Hope Link, with the Jewish Federation, with Mercer Island Youth and Family Services, the National Breast Cancer Coalition, and other groups. I brought that community experience with me and really been a leader on children's mental health issues, whether it's in early learning or in our K through 12 system or in the medical field. And I was honored to receive a national award from the American Academy of Pediatrics for my work in children's mental health. So I look forward to continuing to serve you. Thank you so much for being here for tonight and for your interest.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Milin Thai. I'm running for legislative representative for position 2 in the 41st district. I, unlike many of the candidates you have heard, am not from here. I immigrated to the United States with my family in 1983 from Vietnam with the status of a refugee. I am in front of you as a first-generation refugee running for office. When elected, I will be the very first in our Washington State legislature with that status. And I'm running because of the belief in the American dream, and I am that American dream. I started as a 15 years old who didn't speak a word of English. Came to Federal Way High School, graduated there on time with honor, went on to University of Washington, received a pharmacy degree there, built a pediatric neurology practice with my husband from ground up in Casper, Wyoming. We came home, Washington State, in 2008. I often say, children change the course of your life. We have 2 children, and both of us are public education, a public school product. So I put our kids in school, and therefore I decided to see that education became a main issue for me. I ran as school board director in 2013, get reelected in 2017, served as vice president for the state associations. So I want to bring all that knowledge and expertise to the state legislature to continue the work on education. And thank you for being here tonight. That was really short, I feel like.
It's 2 minutes, right?
Yes, 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Good evening, welcome, and thank you all for tuning in and for being here this evening. I'm Michael Appleby, and I'm running for State Representative, Legislative District 41, Position 2. And the reason why I'm running, which is so important for any candidate, the reason I'm running is 2 years ago, I'm running again, I was sitting in traffic, and they started the tolling program, and I sat there thinking, why does this not seem right? They forced out the two-person carpool lane. There was multiple cars not taking advantage of this new tolling system that seemed reasonable. And then I saw a survey put out there where over 30, almost 40,000 people signed immediately that didn't like the tolling. What I found was that the person in charge of it, the former legislator from this district who is now retired, really didn't listen to the constituents. As I dug a little deeper, the issues that I found 2 years ago, transportation, education, and fiscal tax responsibility, those issues are still there. I ran on that platform 2 years ago, and I found those issues are still prevalent today, more so than ever. With a degree in business economics and a background in finance and investments, and also early on in my work career, I was a machinist for 11 years, a proud member of a UAW local in Connecticut, where I'm originally from. I feel I'm uniquely qualified to represent this district on a variety of issues, especially those most affecting our day-to-day lives, making sure we have good schools, making sure transportation policies work for us, and making sure, most importantly, that we have a balance in our legislature between proper budgeting, fair taxes, and good spending. When I look at my background in investments, I feel uniquely qualified, again, to sit and help make those choices so that we don't put the burden on those most vulnerable, that we get to have an equitable tax situation code here in Washington. With that, I thank you. Look forward to this evening.
Thank you. We'll begin with our questions, and we will start with Tim. First one is about mental health. If more funds become available for mental health care, what would be the best use of the money? Would you support raising taxes to accomplish these goals?
So mental health, I think, is paramount for a number of different reasons within our district and within King County. First and foremost, with our homeless population. Secondly, with kind of the failures with Western State Hospital. They recently lost their certification because of failures in the system there. It was $55 million they were fined, and the state's having to make up for that. I fully support funding mental health issues. I think it's a very important problem, and it not only affects our homeless population, but also affects and what we've seen in schools with gun violence as well. Thank you.
Anna?
So mental health is a critical issue for our state and frankly for our country, but really for our state right now. It's an issue all the way from the littlest learners, the littlest amongst us, through people who maybe had to be at Eastern Western State and through people's lifetime. And what we're seeing is that we're not spending enough money on prevention. We're spending too much money on the crises at the end of people's lives or when they're deep illness. And so we need to start investing in preventive care. Mental health treatment is expensive. It requires medical care. It requires facilities. Right now, we have people who are waiting to leave Western and Eastern State Hospital, but there's not enough resources in the community. This does, in fact, impact our homeless population. It also has led to one of the highest suicide rates in the country right here in Washington State. And we lose 2 to 4 children a week in our state to suicide. So we need to address mental health, and I've been thrilled to be a leader on children's mental health and look forward to continuing to do that.
Tim, do you have a rebuttal? Anything you want to add to that?
I don't.
Okay. There we will move on to Mylin.
Thank you. So as I shared, my background is in healthcare, and I didn't have an opportunity to really share that. Really, my first love, my first passion is around public health. And being able to serve, have the privilege to serve into my second term as school board director, I see mental health impact significantly in not only our students K-12, but also the family members of them. And as far as the preventive care that Tana have shared, I believe that would be where I would like to focus as well. That's number one. Number two, being a healthcare provider, I also see the shortage of the therapists who are providing these care for the people who needed these care. So not only facility, I believe that we need to put the funding into building capacity of the healthcare providers that's serving mental health patient. I keep looking at that time and thinking, I need to stop somewhere. I still have a lot to say, but I will stop there.
Michael?
Thank you. Well, I believe that mental health has been underinvested in for years, and I would be fully supportive of increasing spending in that capacity. And preventive care, we've heard a lot of good ideas up here. I would definitely like to work across the aisle to find good solutions. And when we say make investments, preventative care is phenomenal. There's no better way to address a problem than to address it before it happens or in its earliest stages. It's very efficient and very helpful for the community. But more importantly is, how are we spending those dollars and where are they going? Is the system currently working the way optimally how it should? I don't feel it is. And specifically, when you waste over $50 million of federal support at Western States Hospital, that says there's a fundamental problem in the system. One question I'm not sure that anyone answered, and that is regards to new revenue. So I'll make 2 points on that. Number one is there was over $800 million of additional revenue coming into the state that we can allocate more money into that capacity. Number two is I would be fully in support of additional revenue. And to convince our voters, we need to show that we're using the current dollars wisely. Thank you.
Okay. You get another 30 seconds, Mylin.
Thank you. And so beside preventive care facility providers, I also believe that we need to start at school at the lowest level that is providing counselor, not just any counselor, but really counselor who could be that adult caring for and paying attention to the need of our students and their family, really amped up the public health service going into communities and populations and help provide the service as it's needed, instead of waiting until it becomes a crisis. Thank you. And I think I just broke your pen.
All right, we have many more if you'd like another pen. Continuing on the topic of healthcare, but in a little more general form, what as a state can be done to help preserve affordable healthcare? Is this in your top 5 priorities if elected? And so we will start with Mylin.
Thank you. Thank you for that opportunity. Yes, so affordable healthcare is definitely one of the top 4 priorities as far as my platform running for state representative. I believe that everyone should have health coverage. As I share, my husband is working in the healthcare sector, and so I hear the stories repeatedly about how we as a population need to use emergency room as a place to seek healthcare, and that is not the way how we want to reduce the expense, the cost of healthcare. The way to reduce the cost of healthcare and making sure that we as a community have healthy individuals is one, funding public health so that we can provide the preventive healthcare services. Two, making sure every single individual have a health coverage regardless of their previous conditions. And three, really building that trust relationship between those who seek healthcare and the healthcare providers. Thanks.
Michael?
I have a personal stake in healthcare costs, being self-employed. I'm a small business owner. And a couple things, and I'm going to shoot these off pretty quick, but I believe transparency in billing is key and number one. I believe that when you go to the hospital, those prices that you are going to pay, whether you have insurance or don't have insurance, should be clearly posted. As Mila mentioned, the emergency room is not a place of first resort. It should be a place of last resort. And what I believe we need to do is just have that transparency, number one. Number two is it's important for everyone to understand that the Affordable Care Act did make for every American pre-existing conditions non-existent. Healthcare must be issued regardless of preconditions, and that is nationwide, so it's not something that we need to add. Funding healthcare is always important, and we need to continue to do that, and the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare as it's commonly known, has made it available to many people. But I think a fundamental challenge that our insurance commissioner needs to face is we need to open up our insurance markets to more carriers, and if that means extending that opportunity to insurance companies across state lines, we need to do that as a state. Thank you.
Elin, you have 30 seconds to make any additional comments or to rebut anything that Michael has said.
Well, I'd like to also make an additional comment is that I believe that when we see healthcare as our priorities, then we as a community coming together and solve that issues, we cannot, the one way to make sure that this work is that we are willing to pay into the whole, similar to the system created for Medicare. And that is not only those who are not well paid for insurance. I believe that all of us need to be in this place together, support one another, and that is how we can get healthcare coverage for all. Thank you.
Anna?
Healthcare access is absolutely fundamental. I believe it is a human right. When we think about our homeless population, when we think of people struggling with bankruptcy, so many of these issues are because of a medical catastrophe that has bankrupted their families. If they're unable to hold a job, a lot of times they are unable to get health insurance or don't have health care access. So we need to make sure that everyone does have access to health care. And preventive health care is critical. And what we've seen on the state level is that our Medicaid reimbursement rates are unfortunately so low that people in low-income families are unable to access pediatricians. They're unable to access preventive care. And so we really have to make sure that we are paying what it costs to ensure that all of our citizens can access preventive care, and that includes reproductive care. And I'm thrilled that we passed the Reproductive Parity Act last year that makes sure that those preventive services for women, for family planning, remain and are accessible for everyone. So I think that is very critical.
Tim?
Affordable care is extremely important for all people, but I think what we found with the Affordable Care Act is it wasn't quite affordable for everybody. One of the main problems with it was the mandates that we're seeing right now. When you look at the mandates and what that's leading to with the increase in cost for insurance, for example, if a single male has a mandate in his insurance that he has to cover reproductive costs, it doesn't make sense. Those things need to be removed or modified. We need to find a better way to do that. And the mandates are causing a lot of problems. And it's one thing with transparency and billing. It's the one profession that we don't get to see beforehand what we're paying for, and so there needs to be more transparency for that. I also agree with Michael. He hit it right on the head with the open insurance carriers across state lines. I think would be really helpful in reducing costs.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I think this points out one of the fundamental potential differences between Tim and I. I really think that our community needs to take care of each other. And if we're trying to split hairs between a man not paying for a woman's preventive care, for reproductive care, I don't want to pay for his vasectomy. Where are we going to draw the line? Do I not like, his heart attack? Do I not like her, her diabetes? We have to look at this as a whole system. We're taking care of each other. Everybody deserves to have access to all the health care that they might need.
That right there is exactly why I'm running for office.
Does he get it?
Out of order.
No, this is,
Sorry, I thought I got to,
you,
sorry.
You get a rebuttal?
just a second here. I have to, we started with.
No, we started with Tana and Michael, so
Yep,
Tana had the
and
rebuttal.
Right, so
we're
Tana has
done.
the rebuttal, yeah, so
We're
Tim,
done.
you are out of order. All right.
Okay, we're going to start the next question with Michael about public records. Earlier this year, the legislature voted to exempt the legislative correspondence from public records. Governor Inslee then vetoed the measure, but it's sure to come up again. Some of you already touched on this. How would you balance the need to protect the privacy of some constituents while respecting the transparency of open government?
I believe in complete public records openness, with the balance being that we would not want to disclose individual voters or constituents who are corresponding maybe personal items with their legislatures, but I believe in open meetings and open records. And just to give a little bit more background on that, it's important to know what your legislators are thinking, what lobbyists are lobbying them, and more importantly, I believe in open meetings. And I believe that any negotiation, whether it be school boards, whether it be union negotiations, whether it be the governor and his unions, which financially support him, I believe that those meetings all should be open. So in addition to open records, I believe in open meetings.
Okay. Elaine?
Serving as school board director, open public and open record is definitely the gold star as far as transparency and engaging with community. And so I see this issue as not only the matter of transparency, making sure that we really engage our communities in our conversation, especially our constituents, in some of the really difficult issues to make. And I think by doing that, we make the connection that much needed for some of the difficult decisions to be made. However, I do appreciate the protections of constituents with sensitive issues. And currently, under open public record, we do redact the names of the people or individuals who sent us requests or stories. We also redact addresses or phone number or personal email of those individuals from the record email, for example, sent to the board directors. And so that is what I would support if that issue is coming up.
Okay, Michael, you get a chance to add anything?
Yes, I would just like to add that I believe that any candidate or elected official who accepts $1 of PAC or any campaign contribution should not be in any negotiations with that particular group. Specifically, if the Washington Education Association or any other union group is engaged in negotiations with the school board member, or any votes that will be taken, I believe that that person who accepts campaign contributions should recuse themselves from that process and or open that meeting up.
Okay, we'll go to Tim.
So as far as government transparency, I am all for it. I don't think my opponent is. She voted against it back in February. These records tell us who's trying to influence government agencies and officials, or how these empower or spending time and money. Access to these records is crucial for a functional democracy that holds elected officials accountable. I want you to think about that for a minute. These are documents that are paid for off the taxpayer's dime. You have every right to see them. You have every right to know what's going on. And I find it curious for an elected official to vote against government transparency. Leave it at that.
Donna?
So as I mentioned earlier, I served on the Mercer Island City Council. So as a city government, you're under public records. So I have lived under open public records. I have no problem with open public records. The details of the situation in the legislature this past year was that currently the legislature is under no requirements for open government. There was a bill before us to open it some. I voted for it. It didn't open it all the way. That wasn't an option. There was an option to open it to open some. It was vetoed, and so now we're back to not having any open public records. So I support open records. We currently, because of bill not passing last time, we're not under open public records.
Tim, anything to add?
This is another reason why I'm running for office. I think you deserve somebody in this position that has your best interest in mind. Somebody that is going to vote for government transparency and allow you to see what's going on behind the curtains.
Right. Our next question. As a result of the McCleary decision, limitations were put on the use of local funding for teacher compensation. This precludes the use of levy funds to pay core teacher salaries. Do you believe the law should be changed to allow local levies to be used to support core teacher salaries? And we will start with Tim.
Can you repeat the last part?
Yes. Do you believe the law should be changed to allow local levies to be used to support core teacher salaries?
Not an expert on this, but I don't think that's right. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Donna?
So for our district, education is bar none the top priority when I've gone to the doors, when I have been active in my community, when I talk to people. And fully funding education was critical, and meeting the McCleary requirements set forth by the court was critical, and we did that. I do have to say I don't think we have gone far enough, and we have limited our community's levies in such a way that I think we're going to be seeing a problem among our school districts in the coming years. And it's not about using the levy dollars for teacher salaries. It's using it for things like special education that we didn't fully cover on the state level. It's about using it for school counselors, for school nurses that we don't fully fund from the state. So I think it's critical that we do have more access and flexibility for our school levies so that we can cover the educational needs and the educational priorities for our local districts, because local control is key, and fully funding education and making sure it's quality education is also fundamental.
Great. All right. Tim?
No.
No? So, Milin?
Thank you. So as far as McCleary is concerned, I do not believe that satisfying McCleary is satisfying the constitutional requirement in our state as far as Emily Fund educations. As I shared earlier, one of the reasons why I decided to run is to make sure continue the work in supporting the Emily Fund for public educations. Now, let's go back to McCleary. McCleary is actually cover basic education. And basic education, as Tana pointed out, there's several areas in that, and there is enough people talking about special education. There's enough people talking about many other areas. The one area that nobody is really talking about that is really in basic education being defined was the 21st century. And serving as a school board director in Bellevue School District, many of you know, in Bellevue we have 7 period. And that is a way to be innovative, creative, providing services and opportunity for our students to learn and be competitive as a global citizen in 21st century. So as far as supporting levy for core for core salary for our teacher, I think is an inequitable way to do it. But as far as levy supporting anything outside of that is definitely a must.
Go.
So with regards to education funding, I would agree again with my colleagues here that they haven't done enough, that there needs to be more money put into basic education and also special education, especially when I'm at the doorsteps talking to voters. Education is typically number 1 or 2, depending on the person I speak with, and special education is special. That is underfunded. I volunteer at the school. I see what happens and where the shortfalls are. With regard specifically to the question as to raising the levy lid, the one thing I've observed during these recent negotiations with the honeypot of money, the $1 billion that was unexpectedly put into the educational system, is that it wasn't always spent wisely. And now the reason why there's so much talk about raising the levy lid is specifically because a lot of districts have overspent their budgets and they're going to be running into shortfalls. So the question is, how do we address that? My idea is to not allow the lid to be raised, but to re-examine it to see if certain districts do need additional money for special education and maybe modifying it where we have a stair-step approach to funding programs. Thank you.
Elin.
It entered my mind and it's escaped my mind. I hate that when that happened. But I really wanted to reiterate the conversation around making sure that our school system has to be an equitable educational system, because without that, we continue to perpetuate creating more of a system that's not equitable for everyone. We see it firsthand in our very own school. And so I believe in making sure that the funding from the state going where our teacher needed, and especially living wage for our teachers, but anything else of a program need to be from the levy, because each of the school districts have their own needs and their community should have a say in it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, let's go on to a new question. And this time we'll start with Tana. Let's talk about that carbon tax. 2016, voters defeated the proposed carbon tax. What's different in this year's initiative other than calling it a fee? And do you support it? Why or why not?
So I feel like Mother Nature over the past decade has been saying, I'm in trouble, hey guys, pay attention to me, I'm in trouble, pay attention, please do some prevention. And this past year, she was like, okay, I'm tired, I'm just gonna bring it all. So between the wildfires, between hurricanes and tornadoes and rising water and heating our planet, we have to do something for climate change. We have got to start addressing it, and we are seeing it, whether it's, again, with our orcas, with our wildfires, we're seeing it right here impacting Washington State. Is the carbon tax proposal that's on the initiative on the ballot right now perfect? No. It is a start. I believe that we need to pass this initiative and then have the legislature make some changes to it. We were working on a bill this past legislative session that I think was working with all parties and really coming together, leading to an important place that people could come together on. I think we should continue those conversations and again, modify the initiative once it's passed in a way that will make sure that it's the most effective.
So I do not support a carbon tax, and I'll tell you why, and we shouldn't pass it and then try to figure it out afterwards. Carbon tax is another regressive tax, and it's going to make it more difficult on the middle to lower income families. We've already got one of the highest gas prices in the nation. This is going to add another 14 cents onto each gallon of gas. When you look at our greenhouse gases, we make up about 0.03% of 1% of the global greenhouse gases in the world. It's going to have a negligible effect. What it's going to do is it's going to affect the lower income families for something that's really not going to have much of an effect here in our state. If we're going to enact something like this, it needs to be a national program. I support lowering carbon emissions. I support our environment, but I don't think this is the right way to do it because of who it affects.
Tana?
Thanks. So again, I think it's important to address climate change, and there are many ways to also address the regressivity of our tax system, which I think is also a critical component of what we need to do in this coming year. And we can do that through a variety of ways. So while there's a lot of times when we pass an initiative and then the legislature amends it, that has become kind of common because the initiative is a blunt instrument, whereas legislation is very deliberate. So I think, and I applaud the concerns about regressivity of it, and I'm glad that some of the dollars are to be going to the lower income communities to make sure climate change doesn't impact them as well.
Michael, your thoughts?
So my thoughts on the initiative. And I believe in reducing our carbon footprint. I like to take care of the environment. I'm a fisherman. And more importantly, the reason I'm running is because I believe that our tax system in Washington has a bit of regressiveness to it. And the carbon tax, I don't care what, it's not a fee, it's a tax. Let's call it what it is. The carbon tax is regressive. It exempts the state's most pervasive polluters. And if you actually did tax those polluters, you would drive out jobs. The goal think about the real goal behind a carbon tax. You're taxing behavior with a stick. I believe a carrot. If we believe that a carbon tax, by raising the cost for a social slush fund to an unelected board, will solve the problem, I think we're thinking the wrong way. If we think that by raising the cost of fuel and gas will lower our consumption and help, then let's put that money where it can best be used, and that is back in the roads to help those people who live in Maple Valley or up in Bothell, and we can fix the roads with those dollars. Thank you.
Elin.
Thank you. So I remember what I wanted to say, so I'm going to take 1 second saying it. When my friend over here, Michael, say about that $1 billion coming to education was unexpected. No, it's not unexpected. It is expected. It's what the McCleary is about, and specifically around the McCleary, and that was how the state legislature being clear by the Supreme Court. So I want to make sure that is a correct information out there. It's not unexpected. Okay, back to carbon tax fee slash. So for me, that is Initiative 1631. One of the pieces that I was concerned about the previous initiative when our state coming together, our state leaders coming together and talked about environmental protections, there's many incentive putting out, but many of those incentive is really for people like me who can afford to change my old car into a hybrid or electric car, people like me who could afford to put solar onto my roof, people like me who could do the thing that I can pat myself in my back and be happy about it. I'm supportive of this initiative because it's going to do something for the people who've been impacted by the environmental uncleanliness the most. Thank you.
Michael, you get the last word.
Yeah, I just want to touch on the $1 billion that was funded to McCleary this year. Was scheduled to go into the next fiscal year. The $1 billion that went into McCleary this year was unexpected. There was a $2.3 billion surplus that was not built into the final McCleary fix. The court might not have been happy, but the blueprint was laid out, which when you deviated from the blueprint of how the McCleary case would have been actually settled, it was scheduled to be settled next year. All that additional $1 billion did was create chaos. I would challenge anyone to show me one additional bit of educational outcome as a result of $1 billion.
All right, on to a new topic. Initiative 1639 will make substantial changes to our gun laws. Do you support the changes? What other changes would you support, and are you willing to be a leader for change? So we will start with Mi-Lin.
Thank you. Yes, I support 1639. What addition to that, I would like to see more provisions as far as providing capital funding for schools, as far as making sure the structure is safe for our students. Number two, making sure that the training is not only available for those who come in contact with public, but really providing that training across our community, because all of these things, from the tragedy that we have heard, those who help reduce the injury and the death are really normal citizen who willing to do the right thing. And so having the right training, having the understanding of how to stop and support when an active shooter is happening, that is critical for our community. And it shouldn't be seen only in school or only in a movie theater. This is a situation that impact our way of life.
Michael.
So 1639, I applaud the goals behind it of reducing gun violence. I do support the initiative's ideas of increased background checks. I believe that one should be 21 years old to own a firearm. I also believe that training is in order also. Rights come with responsibilities. However, that said, I believe 1639 is too intrusive, and I am not for it, but I would be a leader in the legislature for those other gun safety measures.
Lynn?
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, excuse me. Tim?
As a military member, as a Navy SEAL, and as a weapons expert, like Michael said, I appreciate a lot of the verbiage that's in this. When I went back and read it, it's a really long initiative. There's things in there that I don't agree with, but I agree with it in theory. I think extending the age to 21 is appropriate. The training part of it is appropriate, but I don't agree with everything that's in it. I think it needs to be rewritten, it needs to be redone. One of the things that's in there is if somebody steals your handgun from your house and kills somebody with it, now you could be convicted of it as a felon. It's things like that that need to be pulled from this.
I am in strong support of Initiative 1639. There are many components of the bill that have been, of the initiative that have been billed before the legislature in the past. And after the Parkland shooting in Florida, we were at the very end of our session, and it was a devastating moment for our entire community and certainly down in Olympia, and to realize that we couldn't take action right then because of timing. And so to have this initiative come forward gives me so much joy to see that we are going to make some advances on protecting our communities. I think these are really common sense pieces of legislation. I also hope to pass a bill that I've been working on for a number of years to allow the Washington State Patrol to destroy weapons when they come across them in a forfeited certain situation, so that Washington State is not, in essence, a gun dealer. Because right now we sell those weapons when we get them into Washington State Patrol's hands, whereas every other law enforcement agency across the state has the option to keep, auction them, or destroy them if needed. So I want to make sure the State Patrol has that option as well.
Jim?
In theory and in essence, I'm in support of it, but not all of it. It needs to be reworked a little bit. The verbiage needs to be changed. I am in full support of training and gun control and background checks and extending the age, but I think this initiative needs a little bit more work.
Thank you.
Okay, this is going to be our last question from us, and we will be starting with Michael. It's likely that everyone who owns or manages a business in Washington State will say that businesses are overregulated. What specifically would you do to make it easier for businesses to find some regulation relief while still protecting the consumer and the environment?
So multi-pronged answer. Number one is, I believe, the licensing requirements for medium to small businesses, especially when you look at individual services. I think that we can take a deeper look at a lot of these medium and smaller businesses, especially for the individual sole proprietor, whether it be massage therapist or a hair braider, and we can look at some of the onerous regulations and licensing requirements. While regulation is important, I believe that we can, again, drop those barriers. The second thing we can do is for our business community, again, small and medium-sized businesses, is we need to add an additional carrier for our LNI so that there's competition, so that we can reduce the cost of operating a business in the state of Washington and helping our business owners out. Third is, I believe that for small business owners and to keep the incubator going in Washington, I think we need to take a look at the B&O tax system and put in an incentive for newer businesses to help them to prosper and flourish. You can see more on my website as to how I would attack that. Thank you.
Amy Lynn?
Thank you. As a person of color, most of the business owners as person of color do own smaller businesses, and they experience a lot of these difficulties and barriers making sure that their business is thriving and providing a service to the community. The balance between regulating a business and the protections of consumers is definitely a fine balance. And serving as a school board director is one of the P's I understood very clearly is around engagement and really bringing people together, having conversation, learning from one another what are the challenges the other have, and that is when we can together solve complex issues. And so for me, my leadership style is about engaging people, is about bringing people together and have that conversation and sharing the responsibilities so that business can be thriving and consumer can be served.
Michael, last thoughts?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear any specific, no, I didn't hear any specific course of action on that answer.
Okay, Tana?
So my first bill as a legislator was to raise a threshold before small businesses would have to pay B&O tax. And I think we need to continue to address that issue. Right now, small businesses have to file paperwork when they have $50,000 of income. And that doesn't mean that they have any B&O tax required that they owe, but they still have to file that paperwork. And that in of itself will often require them to hire a CPA or to have those skills themselves and do it themselves. So we need to raise the B&O tax threshold before that kicks in. We've been looking at ways to reform B&O tax so that no small business making less than $200,000, for instance, would have any requirements for paperwork or for paying B&O tax, and I think that would be really helpful. The other thing I am looking forward to is improving our transportation. I know I've talked to a lot of business owners who are thrilled about Sound Transit coming in so that their workers can get from different parts of the community, of the counties, to their place of business, and that's going to help them and their employees.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So there's a number of different things that we can help our small businesses and just businesses in general, and I do agree with the B&O tax. There needs to be a threshold for new business owners. It's difficult in the first couple of years to get a business up and running, and there needs to be we need to raise the threshold and maybe not charge them a B&O tax the first year or two until they really get up and running and figure out what that level of revenue is where we implement that. Another thing is L&I reform. I think we need to make that more business friendly and not so much so on the side of the individual. And then with regulations and licensing regulations, I agree with Michael on that as well. Transportation, when we go back to the taxes, our state has over 50 taxes, and when we look at the gas tax, the price of gas, and the gas taxes on those affect commerce, and I'm getting the stop.
Rebuttal.
I was excited to read in the paper just this week that workman's comp percentage is going down for the first time in many years, is going down by 5%. And that really is due to some of the work that has been going on, actually about 10 years ago, people coming together in the legislature to reform the workers' compensation system. And it took a while to implement and to get there, but hopefully we'll continue to see those percentages going down.
Thank you. That's going to wrap up that portion of the forum. And we're now going to go to your questions of your opponent. And we will start with Tim. Please ask your question for Tana.
Okay. So our last candidate forum, a question was asked about who took donations from PSE. And my opponent is one of two people that raised their hand, but she never really answered the question when it was asked of her why she takes donations from PSE with regards to the new electrical towers that they're building. PSE is building these solely to funnel energy to Canada. They stand to make billions of dollars off this project, possibly harming our communities, cutting down trees, all those kind of things. So I'd like to know why you take donations from PSE and why you're supporting this program.
I am pleased we have received donations for a number of companies, a number of organizations, and dozens of constituents. And PSE is one of them. And I didn't take their money in order to support Energize Eastside. Puget Sound Energy plays an important role in our communities. They have been wonderfully responsive, providing green power in our communities across the 41st District. And they are working towards providing more of that, doing solar installations, providing incentives for people to implement solar and other green energy. So while there's definitely been some conflicts around in our communities around Energize Eastside, I do think it's critical that we make sure that we provide energy to our growing community, our growing business community, our growing residents across the area. And it's kind of like you don't think about your sewer until it doesn't work, and we don't often want to think about our electricity until it doesn't work. So it really wasn't a tit for tat. I don't play it that way, but I'm pleased to have such a broad level of support across our community.
Tana, what would you like to ask your opponent?
So, Tim, our community is growing. We've had, hundreds of thousands of people move into our area each year, and you don't support, from what I understand, Sound Transit 3 and some other, and I'm not sure where you stand on the tolls on 405, and I'm just wondering, what are your solutions to our roadways that are already at capacity, that are already full and booming, especially as we have such a growth in our community?
That's a really interesting question. And, the more research that I do in this, I find, and it's kind of interesting, that people are being basically forced into mass transit. ST3, I think, was sold to the people without fully explaining the cost behind it. It's another one of those expenses that is really hitting people hard. And the more people that I talk to about this, they didn't realize the amount of money that the car tabs were going to cost and how this was going to hit their paychecks. And for some families, this is hitting them on multiple vehicles, motorhomes, motorcycles, all that kind of. It's costing a lot of money. And the technology that we're looking out to 2030, 2035, 2040. And a lot of people that are paying for ST3 right now are not going to be the ones using it. And so that's why I have a hard time standing behind it right now.
Okay. Lynn, I'll bet you've got a question.
I have so many questions. I'm sitting here smiling because one of my questions, Hannah took it. But I suppose it's different enough. We all walk around, we see our signs across the district, and kudos to that. There's this one section, it looks like a garden of Michael Applebee's. It's really fun. But on it, it says something like, let's get us moving, and then comma now. So I'm curious if you could share with us what's your thought as far as resolving our transportation issue.
Thank you. I really appreciate that question. So on my...
I'm really nice, as you can see.
Darn. A very good competitor, thank you. Well, my slogan is "Let's get moving now" with an exclamation point. And that's important because as there was an article in the Seattle Times op-ed this past week, I believe it was Friday, from two of the co-founders of the Eastside Transportation Association, it talked about building out the 405. What I've seen consistent in government is that plans are built and they spend a lot of time crafting plans and outlines and different strategies, and they're not always fulfilled. So number one, what I would do is let's get moving. Number one is build out the 405, the remaining. Currently on 405 south of I-90, which covers the southern part of the 41st District, we're adding one lane on either side of the road where the master plan called for building out 2 lanes. Inevitably, the question comes up is, gee, how are you going to pay for it? Gas tax. Contrary to what any other politician will tell you, I have no problem on single-purpose use taxes. Number 2 is with regards to sound transit, as far as getting moving. Understand that upwards of 65-ish plus % of available transportation dollars is being funneled into sound transit, and ultimately it's going to move less than 4% of people. Lastly, sound transit was not designed to eliminate congestion.
Okay, well, Michael, did we save the best question for last?
I hope so. I hope so. So in the 41st District, we are so fortunate with very good schools and lots of great involvement and a lot of support from our legislature. Unfortunately, throughout the state, they don't have the same level of commitment from the community and or the tax base to support the levies such as we have in Bellevue, and I think on Mercer Island also. So we have phenomenal schools. And I applaud the work toward equalizing the outcomes. Unfortunately, that can't be said for the entire state. The 41st District, time and time again, has expressed support for charter schools to help other communities where charter schools are not, where there's inequitable outcomes, especially in Seattle. And the charter schools in Washington have operated now for a few years very, very well. You're opposed to charter schools. Can you tell us why?
Yes, absolutely. Just for the record, as far as your answer, I want to make sure to reiterate that you do support the plan for 405 coming forward. It sounds like it. But anyway, I'm going to answer your question.
And eliminate tolls, I forgot. Thank you.
Yes. So I oppose charter school because when I start volunteering in my own kids' school, classroom to start out with, and then their school, and eventually in PTSA, and eventually in the position as an elected official for Bellevue School District since 2013, I have seen significant improvement and commitment from the communities, parents, business, leaders, teachers, staff, administrators. Everyone is about making sure that we have the best teacher in the classroom, making sure that the curriculum that we have is available for our kids, making sure that the instructional is of high quality. And in Bellevue School District, as you can see, we do have program or choice school such as Jingmei for Mandarin, Puesta for Spanish, International, and Big Picture. And so we provide choices for our students, and Bellevue is the North Star of what it could look like in public education.
All right. And you want me to? Okay. All right, at this point, each candidate now has 1 minute for closing remarks. So we began tonight with Tim, so let's have Tana go first.
I look forward to continuing to serve the 41st District as state representative and to working to make sure that working families have an easier life, whether it's ensuring that all employees have equal pay, that children have access to mental health services, that we reduce gun violence and make sure our communities are safe, and that we're protecting their environment so people can work and play and enjoy this beautiful area in which we live. So I ask for your vote. I look forward to continuing to work hard to bring the priorities forward that I hear at the doors and when I speak with all of you, and to stay involved in the community. And I think that is what makes representation so fabulous, is being involved in our community, speaking with all of you, and bringing those values and concerns to the legislature. So I look forward to continuing to do that. Thank you for your past support, and I ask for your support again.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'd like to do a little compare and contrast, and if you'd like a legislator who supports higher taxes, more government regulation and anti-business policies, who votes against government transparency and is funded by special interest groups, lobbyists, and corporations like PSE, you may want to vote for my opponent. If you want a legislator that's literally willing to put his life on the line for you, if you want someone who will never forget who they're representing and be your voice in Olympia, someone who's pro-business, smaller government, and less taxes, who champions equal opportunity and equal pay for all, who vigorously defends our First and Second Amendments, and will always be on your side when it comes to government transparency, because it's your right. I'm that candidate. I appreciate your support. And thank you for being here tonight. Thank you.
Elin?
Thank you. I am running because both opportunity and responsibility. In fact, I share in many of the meeting with my community is that I love what I do. I love being on school board. I love caring for my children, and I call 20,000 plus students in the Bellevue School District my children. I am passionate about education, and the reason I'm running is because of the environment we all live in currently. As a refugee from Vietnam 35 plus years ago, I want to ensure that we, Washington State, continue to be a welcoming community. And by welcoming community, we don't just welcome people into our state and just left them there. It's about making sure that they are being educated, making sure that their health coverage is being cared for, making sure that the affordable housing is on top of mind, and making sure that our climate, our environment is being protected, not only for us or our next generation, but for many generations to come. And I appreciate your support and vote.
Michael.
Thank you for the opportunity this evening. Great questions, and appreciate those of you at home watching. You have a big choice to make here in a few weeks. My platform is balanced. When you think about what's important to your day-to-day life, good education, getting to work, getting to school, making sure that it's balanced with fair and equitable taxes, I'm your candidate. I don't bring just one platform to the table, I bring multiple. We need a clean environment. We need to have a hospital welcoming environment. We need choice in schools. We need reasonable taxes. I make a pledge that I do not support a state income tax or a state capital gains tax, which is a form of an income tax. I don't support increasing the levy lid, and more importantly, I want to represent the district, and when we go down to Olympia, we need transportation solutions that work for all the people, not 4% of the people that typically don't live in this district. I think we're overtaxed. I think we need to have property tax relief for our most vulnerable and our seniors. So with that, please vote Michael Appleby on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Thank you for agreeing to come tonight and for agreeing to serve the 41st Legislative District. Your service is very much appreciated. And audience, we had other questions that we did not get to, unfortunately, on school construction costs, legalized drugs, high school graduation rates. So Hopefully, maybe if you attend another candidate forum, your question will then be answered, all right? The Cable TV Commission and staff have been recording tonight's forum, and it will be replayed every day until the election on City Channel 21 and streamed on the city's website. So please tell your friends to tune in so they can also become more informed voters. So thank you all for coming tonight. And good night.